Many of my colleagues, both Republicans and Democrats, have taken to the floor today in support of the North Korea Sanctions and Policy Enhancement Act. It's a bill that I, too, am pleased to support. This bill was developed in the Senate Foreign Relations Committee through the same spirit of collaboration and collegiality in America's best interests that we've seen in this committee time and time again. Senators Gardner and Menendez deserve real praise for their work together drafting this bill, and I thank and commend Chairman Corker and Ranking Member Cardin for leading an open amendment process within the committee that strengthened the bill with truly constructive changes. Among them, an amendment from Senator Markey to crack down on transfers of conventional weapons to and from North Korea, and another from Senator Shaheen, which makes sure these new sanctions won't impede our ability to recover the remains of any lost American service member in North Korea. I want to thank Senators Corker and Cardin, not only for advancing this bill, but just as importantly for leading the Foreign Relations Committee in a bipartisan spirit that reflects the best of the Senate in an uncertain world. This is a strong bill, and I'm confident it will enhance sanctions against North Korea in response to the regime's nuclear test last month and its dangerous nuclear missile launch last weekend. It is a clear, direct response that sends an unmistakable signal to North Korea and the world that we intend to continue to be actively engaged. But frankly, the floor debate this week at some moments has not always reflected that same bipartisan spirit and the same spirit in which the House overwhelmingly passed a similar bill last month. Somehow, the debate has at some times shifted from questions of how best to punish North Korea for its illegal actions and how we can pull together in that effort to questions about President Obama's broader policy goals and motives. Suggestions that the president somehow enabled North Korea to engage in this provocative behavior by pursuing a separate nuclear agreement with Iran, I think only distract from our shared goal that serves as the foundation and bipartisan purpose of this legislation. So I urge a more constructive course. Mr. President, we should apply the same bipartisan spirit in which we developed the North Korea Sanctions and Policy Enhancement Act towards passage of the Iran Policy Oversight Act, which was led by Ranking Member Cardin, and which would ensure that Congress can exercise effective oversight of the nuclear agreement with Iran. Just as members of the Foreign Relations Committee worked together to develop a sanctions bill on North Korea, Republicans and Democrats in this body should come together to enforce the terms of the nuclear deal with Iran and to push back on Iran's support for terrorism in the Middle East, its ongoing human rights violations, and its illegal ballistic missile tests. The Iran Policy Oversight Act offers us a credible way to accomplish all of these goals. When it comes to the recent nuclear agreement with Iran, also known as the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, or the JCPOA, too often we find ourselves distracted from the core question of whether that deal has made Iran less able to pursue development of a nuclear weapon. We're seeing the same tendency play out today, as some of my colleagues have promoted a false comparison between the JCPOA and the 1994 agreed framework, which the United States negotiated with North Korea with the goal of stopping North Korea from developing a nuclear weapon. These comparisons make the false implication that just because the 94 framework utterly failed to keep North Korea from pursuing an illicit nuclear weapons program, that the JCPOA is destined to similarly fail with regards to Iran. I'm going to take a moment, if I might, and explain why this comparison is inaccurate at best and misleading at worst. First, the 1994 framework with North Korea was just that, a brief framework or an outline. Its text just 3 pages long. The nuclear agreement with Iran, on the other hand, is nearly 160 pages. It's thorough, detailed, comprehensive, outlining the international community's expectations, specifying deadlines and deliverables, and laying out in clear terms the consequences for violations of the deal. The second difference between the two is just as fundamental. The 94 agreed framework with North Korea did not seek to block North Korea's plutonium pathway. Not only does the JCPOA require that Iran eliminate its ability to produce weapons-grade plutonium, but international inspectors have recently certified Iran actually did so by filling the core of the Arak heavy water reactor with concrete. The importance of including this provision in the JCPOA was made even clearer yesterday when James Clapper, the United States Director of National Intelligence, confirmed that North Korea has restarted its plutonium production reactor and may begin recovering spent plutonium fuel within a matter of just weeks. If Iran even attempted to do the same, the international community would now know and be able to take action long before Iran could achieve that objective. The third key difference is this: the JCPOA allows the IAEA, or the International Atomic Energy Agency, full access to monitor Iran's entire nuclear cycle, from uranium mines to mills to centrifuge production workshops to enrichment facilities. Never before, including back in '94 with North Korea, has a nuclear agreement given international inspectors such comprehensive access to monitor and inspect compliance. In fact, when I recently visited the IAEA headquarters in Vienna, Austria, the head of the agency said that the access they've gotten to Iran's entire range of nuclear activities goes well beyond the access it had to North Korea in the 1990s. A fourth difference is just as crucial. The JCPOA requires Iran to abide by the so-called additional protocol and other additional measures, which guarantee the IAEA can seek access to suspicious, undeclared locations. This additional protocol, which is a key deterrent to cheating, didn't even exist in 1994. The nuclear deal with Iran contains defined timelines for access to suspect potential nuclear sites and a dispute resolution mechanism that will resolve differences between Iran and the international community in favor of access and inspection. The '94 agreed framework didn't include any of these protections. Fifth, the JCPOA is an agreement between Iran and the international community. While the United States maintains its ability to snap back unilateral sanctions to punish Iran, the strength of the deal comes not just from the United States' support, but from buy-in by our P5+1 partners, the United Kingdom, France, Germany, Russia, China. And we have to continue to work together tirelessly on a bipartisan basis to ensure that those partners remain partners in enforcement of the deal. Sixth, the JCPOA puts incentives in the right place, halting any sanctions relief for Iran until after the international community verified it had complied with the core terms of the deal. The '94 framework allowed North Korea compensation and sanctions relief simply for signing up before the agreement was even implemented, clearly a fatal flaw. And last, in some ways most importantly, although both Iran and North Korea are dangerous, radical regimes, revolutionary regimes, and they are both ostensibly led by so-called supreme leaders, they exist in different regions and have different goals and exist in different contexts. I do think that Iran, rightly or wrongly, seeks and needs integration with the world economy, and North Korea continues to be an isolated rogue regime from the rest of the world. So, Mr. President, the 7 differences I've just briefly outlined, I think, show the fundamental differences between the '94 agreed framework with North Korea, which failed, and the JCPOA with Iran, which I hope and pray will still prove to be successful. We must focus on enforcing rigorously the terms of that JCPOA and pushing back on Iran's bad behavior in a bipartisan fashion, in the same spirit in which my colleagues in the Foreign Relations Committee developed this vital and important North Korea bill. One way we could do so is to pass the Iran Policy Oversight Act, a bill led and developed by Senator Cardin and members of the Foreign Relations Committee who were both supporters and opponents of the JCPOA. The Iran Policy Oversight Act would clarify ambiguous provisions in the JCPOA, establish in statute our commitment to enforcing the deal, engage in comprehensive efforts to counter Iranian activity in the Middle East, and provide increased support for our allies in the region, especially our vital ally, Israel. I commend Senator Cardin for his leadership in drafting a bill strong enough to earn the co-sponsorship from both supporters and opponents of that nuclear deal. Mr. President, even in a dysfunctional Congress, today's debate and passage of this North Korea Sanctions and Policy Enhancement Act shows that we can come together to make our country safer in the face of a dangerous world. Congress did the same last May when we came together to enact the Iran Nuclear Agreement Review Act, which gave Congress a clear and focused opportunity to review the terms of the JCPOA before it was finalized. We can and must do similar things again. We should work together, Republicans and Democrats, in the spirit of this North Korea Sanctions and Policy Enhancement Act and the Iran Nuclear Agreement Review Act, to introduce, debate, and pass legislation to show Iran and our allies that the United States is serious about continuing to hold them accountable for their bad behavior and to continue to demonstrate our leadership in the Pacific region and our determination to contain North Korea's dangerous nuclear activities.